My name is Henry, and I'm 28 years old. The annual family meeting always felt like walking into a courtroom where I was already guilty. This year was different, though. I had decided something important. As everyone settled into the dining room of our family estate in Portland, Oregon, I kept my eyes on one piece of furniture: my late father's chair. The leather was worn smooth from years of use, and just looking at it made my chest ache. Dad had been gone for 3 years, but that chair still smelled like his cologne. I took a deep breath and walked toward it. My hands were shaking slightly as I reached for the armrests. Just as I started to sit down, I felt a sharp tug. The chair jerked backward. I stumbled, barely catching myself on the table edge. Laughter erupted around me. I looked up to see Marcus standing there, one hand still gripping the chair back, that familiar smirk plastered across his face. My cousin had always been like this, but something inside me shifted at that moment. I straightened up slowly, meeting his eyes. The room went completely silent. Everyone stared at me, waiting to see if I would back down like I always did. Marcus was still grinning, clearly expecting me to apologize and slink away to some corner seat. Instead, I cleared my throat and spoke clearly. "I'm claiming the family mediator role." The words hung in the air like smoke. Uncle Raymond's fork clattered against his plate. Aunt Lydia gasped. My grandmother Miriam leaned forward in her wheelchair, her eyes sharp and alert. Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced. "You. The mediator? Henry, you've got nothing to back that up. You're nobody in this family." His words stung, but I had prepared for this. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. The paper was yellowed with age, and my father's handwriting covered the front. "Dad left this for me," I said quietly. "It explains everything." Marcus's face changed instantly. The smugness vanished, replaced by something darker. Before I could say another word, he lunged across the table, grabbing for the envelope. His fingers caught the edge of it. The envelope tore with a horrible ripping sound. Marcus stumbled backward, clutching half of it. I held the other half, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The torn paper revealed only fragments of my father's letter. I could make out phrases like "hidden key" and "the truth must," but nothing complete. Marcus held up his piece triumphantly. "This proves nothing, it's just scraps. You probably made it yourself." Several relatives nodded, muttering agreement. I felt panic rising in my throat. 3 years of waiting, of grieving, of planning this moment, and it was falling apart because of one violent grab. I looked down at the torn edges, trying to read what remained. The handwriting was definitely my father's, but without the full message, nobody would believe me. Then I heard the scrape of a chair. Aunt Lydia stood up slowly. She was my father's younger sister, always quiet during these meetings. But now she walked toward the center of the room, her hand digging into her purse. She pulled out something that made my breath catch. Another torn piece of paper, edges yellowed and frayed. "I found this in Robert's office," Aunt Lydia said softly, using my father's name. "It was 5 years ago, before he died. I didn't know what it meant then, so I kept it safe." She placed her fragment on the table. My hands trembled as I laid mine next to hers. Marcus reluctantly added his piece. When all 3 sections came together, they formed a complete letter. My father's handwriting became clear and purposeful. The message read, "To my son Henry, the path to truth lies where no one is willing to look. Seek the seat of judgment that no longer judges. There you will find what was hidden from sight. The family's future depends on courage, not comfort. Love always, Dad." Uncle Raymond stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "This changes everything. If Robert left specific instructions, we need to follow them immediately." Grandma Miriam nodded, tapping her cane twice on the floor for emphasis. "The letter mentions a seat." "What seat?" Marcus interrupted loudly. "This is ridiculous. We're wasting time on treasure hunt nonsense." But I knew exactly what seat my father meant, the inner circle seat. It was an old chair in the corner of the estate's main hall, positioned near the fireplace. Nobody had sat in it for at least 15 years. Family legend said it was where the original patriarch used to make final decisions on disputes, but after his death, everyone considered it bad luck to use it. Marcus saw the realization on my face. "Don't even think about it, Henry. That seat is off limits. Everyone knows that." He moved to block my path, but Grandma Miriam's cane struck the floor again, harder this time. "Let the boy look," she commanded. Her voice left no room for argument. I walked past Marcus, feeling his glare burning into my back. The inner circle seat looked ancient, its dark wood carved with intricate patterns. Dust covered the armrests. As I stood in front of it, doubt crept in. What if there was nothing there? What if this was just my father's way of teaching me some philosophical lesson about courage? Marcus called out mockingly, "Go ahead, Henry. Sit in the cursed chair. See what happens." I sat down. Immediately, I heard a hollow thud beneath me. The sound was unmistakable. Something was under the seat cushion. My fingers fumbled with the edges of the worn fabric. The cushion came away easily, revealing the wooden base beneath. There, in a small carved-out hollow, lay a brass key wrapped in paper. I picked it up carefully. The key was old and heavy, its surface spotted with rust. The paper wrapping had more of my father's handwriting. It read simply, "This opens what was sealed. Find the heritage box." Marcus moved fast. He crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed my wrist. "That key belongs to the whole family, not just you." His grip was tight enough to hurt. I pulled back, but he held firm. We were locked in a tense standoff when Grandma Miriam's cane struck the floor 3 times, a sound that meant absolute attention required. "Enough!" Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. "I'm calling a formal vote. Whoever finds and unlocks the heritage box will be confirmed as the next family mediator." "That's final." Marcus released my wrist but leaned in close, whispering, "You won't win this." He turned and stormed out of the room. I stood frozen for a moment, processing what had just happened. A formal vote from Grandma Miriam was binding. The family operated under old rules, traditions that went back generations. If she declared a challenge, everyone had to honor it. Uncle Raymond approached me cautiously. "Henry, do you even know where the heritage box is? Nobody's seen it in decades." I shook my head. "But Dad left me this key for a reason. He knew I'd figure it out." Aunt Lydia touched my shoulder gently. "Your father was always good at puzzles. He wouldn't make this impossible." I clutched the key tighter and headed toward the door Marcus had exited through. If he was already searching, I needed to move fast. The family estate was massive, built in the early 1900s with dozens of rooms, hidden spaces, and architectural quirks. I walked quickly through the main corridor, my mind racing through possibilities. Where would my father hide something important? Where would nobody think to look? I heard footsteps above me on the 2nd floor. They were deliberate, searching. Marcus was already tearing through rooms up there. Then I noticed something. The old library door, always kept closed, was standing slightly ajar. The library had been my father's favorite room. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined every wall, filled with volumes on history, law, and philosophy. A musty smell hit me as I pushed the door wider. The afternoon light filtering through dusty windows cast long shadows across the floor. I saw them immediately. Footprints in the dust, leading deeper into the room. Marcus had been here already. The prints went toward the back corner where the oldest books were kept, the ones nobody had touched in years. I followed the trail carefully, my shoes leaving new prints alongside the first set. The footprint stopped at a large mahogany bookshelf. I ran my fingers along the spines, reading faded titles. Then I noticed something odd. One section of books looked different. The dust pattern wasn't quite right, as if someone had recently disturbed them. I pulled on a thick volume titled Family Law and Heritage. The book didn't budge at first, then suddenly shifted. A clicking sound echoed through the library. The entire bookshelf swung inward slowly, revealing a dark passage behind it. A loud thud came from somewhere upstairs, followed by the sound of something heavy falling. I hesitated at the threshold of the hidden passage, torn between investigating the tunnel and checking on the noise upstairs. The crash came again, louder this time. It sounded like it came from the old storage room directly above the library. I made a decision and sprinted for the stairs. Taking them 2 at a time, I reached the 2nd floor breathing hard. The storage room door was wide open. Inside, Marcus was surrounded by fallen boxes and scattered papers. He was on his hands and knees, clearly hiding something beneath his body. "What did you find?" I demanded, stepping into the room. Marcus's head snapped up. His eyes were wild, almost panicked. "Nothing, get out of here." But I saw the edge of paper sticking out from under his knee. I moved closer. "Show me what you're hiding." Marcus scrambled to his feet, the paper clutched in his fist. "This is mine. I found it first." He backed toward the window. It was old-fashioned, the kind that swung outward on hinges. His free hand reached for the latch. "Marcus, don't be stupid. We're on the second floor." But Marcus wasn't thinking clearly. He fumbled with the window latch as I lunged forward. My hand caught his shirt collar just as he started to climb through. The fabric bunched in my grip and he jerked backward. The paper in his hand tore free and fluttered to the floor between us. For a second we both stared at it. Then Marcus yanked himself free, his shirt ripping slightly, and tumbled through the window. I heard him hit the ground outside with a grunt, followed by running footsteps. I let him go and picked up the paper instead. It was a hand-drawn map, but only a portion of one. The edges were ragged where Marcus had torn it from something larger. I could make out part of the estate's grounds with a symbol marked in red ink near what looked like the garden area. But without the rest of the map, the location was meaningless. I turned the paper over. On the back, in my father's handwriting, were the words, "Two halves make one truth." I folded the map fragment carefully and put it in my pocket. Marcus was gone, probably regrouping and planning his next move. I needed to find the other half. I went back downstairs where most of the family had gathered in the living room, talking in hushed tones. Grandma Miriam sat in her wheelchair by the fireplace, her sharp eyes watching everything. When she saw me, she gestured for me to approach. "Marcus ran past here like a scared rabbit," she said. "What happened?" I explained about finding the hidden passage in the library and the confrontation in the storage room. I showed her the torn map fragment. Grandma Miriam studied it carefully, then reached into a pocket in her wheelchair. She pulled out another piece of paper, this one older and more brittle. "Your father gave this to me 2 months before he died. He said I'd know when to use it." She handed it to me. My hands shook as I placed the two pieces together. They matched perfectly. When aligned, the complete map showed the entire estate grounds. The red symbol Marcus and I had both seen now made sense. It marked a specific location behind the main house, near the old oak tree that had stood there for over 100 years. But what really caught my attention was something else. Where the two map pieces joined, a symbol appeared that hadn't been visible before. The paper must have been treated with some kind of chemical that only showed up when the halves were reunited. The symbol glowed faintly in the firelight. I held the map up to the window for better light. The symbol was clearly a tree, but with specific markings on its trunk. 3 horizontal lines on the left side. I knew that tree. The oak behind the estate had those exact markings, scars from where lightning had struck it decades ago. "The oak tree," I said aloud. Uncle Raymond heard me. "That tree is enormous. What are you looking for exactly?" I didn't answer. I was already moving toward the back door. As I burst outside, I saw Marcus ahead of me, running across the lawn toward the oak. He had figured it out too, probably from seeing the map before I grabbed it. By the time I reached the tree, Marcus was already on his knees digging at the base. His hands clawed at the dirt frantically, pulling up grass and roots. "Marcus, stop. We should do this together." He ignored me, digging faster. Then his fingers hit something solid. A wooden chest, small but heavy-looking, emerged from the earth. Marcus hauled it up and set it on the grass. The chest was locked with an old brass mechanism that looked identical to the key I carried. Marcus tried to pry it open with his bare hands, but it wouldn't budge. I pulled the key from my pocket. "You need this." Marcus's face twisted with frustration. For a moment I thought he might attack me to take it, but instead he stepped back, breathing hard. "Just open it," he said quietly. I knelt beside the chest and inserted the key. It turned smoothly despite its age. The lock clicked open. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture, was a leather-bound book. The cover was embossed with our family name. I lifted it carefully. Marcus leaned over my shoulder as I opened to the first page. What I saw there made my blood run cold. The book was a record of every family mediator going back 5 generations. Each entry detailed their decisions, the money they controlled, and any violations of family trust. I flipped through pages until I found my father's name. His entry ended with a note, removed from consideration due to fabricated evidence presented by Samuel. Samuel. That was Marcus's father's name. Marcus went white. That's not true. My father would never. I turned more pages until I found Samuel's entry. There, in careful handwriting, was a confession he'd apparently written before his own death. He admitted to forging documents to make my father look financially irresponsible. The confession explained everything. 25 years ago, when the family was choosing a new mediator, the position had come down to my father and Marcus's father. Samuel had been desperate to win because the mediator controlled significant family assets. So he had created fake bank statements suggesting my father was secretly gambling away family money. My grandfather, believing the evidence, had chosen Samuel instead. My father never knew why he'd been passed over. He died thinking he'd simply not been good enough. I stood up, holding the book above my head so everyone who had followed us outside could see it. Marcus tried to grab it, but Uncle Raymond and 2 other relatives stepped between us. "This book proves my father was cheated," I said loudly. Samuel admitted it in writing. Marcus was shouting now, denying everything, claiming his father would never do such a thing. But his protest sounded hollow even to him. Then Aunt Lydia spoke up, her voice cutting through the chaos. "I need to tell everyone something I should have said years ago." The entire family turned to look at her. She took a deep breath. "I knew what Samuel did. I saw him making those fake documents." Aunt Lydia's confession fell on the group like a bomb. "I was only 19, she continued, tears forming in her eyes. "Samuel caught me in his office one day. I saw the bank statements on his desk, saw him cutting and pasting numbers to change them. He told me if I said anything, he'd make sure my brother, your father Henry, lost everything. He said he had the power to destroy Robert's life completely." She wiped her eyes roughly. I was scared. I was young and stupid, and I kept quiet. By the time I understood what I'd done, Robert had given up trying to prove his innocence. I convinced myself it was too late to matter. Marcus stood frozen. "You're lying. You're all working together against me." But nobody was listening to him anymore. I felt a mix of emotions. Anger at Aunt Lydia for staying silent so long, but also understanding of the impossible position she'd been put in. I turned the book to a page near the back where new entries could be added. Tucked into the spine was a sealed envelope, smaller than the others. It had my name on it in my father's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter inside was dated 1 week before my father's death. "My dear Henry," it began, "if you're reading this, you've followed the path I laid out and discovered the truth about what happened all those years ago. I never sought revenge against Samuel, though I had every right to. Instead, I focused on building a life of integrity, raising you to understand what real honor means. But I couldn't let the lie stand forever. The family needs healing, and that starts with truth. You are the one meant to bring that healing. Your courage to face Marcus, to seek out these hidden answers, proves you're ready for the responsibility I was denied. Trust yourself. Lead with fairness, not bitterness. The family's future is in capable hands. I love you more than words can express. Stay true to yourself always." Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. Something else slipped from the envelope and fell to the grass. It was a legal document folded into a small square. I picked it up and unfolded it carefully. The heading read, "Family Mediator Succession Clause." I started reading aloud. The document outlined a legal provision my father had established with a lawyer 2 years before he died. The clause stated clearly, "In the event that evidence emerges of fraudulent activity affecting the selection of a family mediator, the wronged party's direct heir shall be automatically nominated as the next mediator candidate." It was dated and signed by my father, witnessed by Grandma Miriam and a lawyer named David Peterson. I looked at my grandmother. "You knew about this?" Grandma Miriam nodded slowly. "Robert came to me privately. He'd finally figured out what Samuel had done, found some proof. He wanted to make sure that if anything happened to him, you'd have a chance at what should have been his. I signed as witness because it was the right thing to do." Marcus's face had gone from white to deep red. "This is fake. That signature could be forged." Grandma Miriam fixed him with a stare that could have frozen fire. "Are you calling me a liar, boy?" Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked around at the assembled family members. Nobody was on his side anymore. Even his own mother, Marcus's Aunt Sarah, was shaking her head in disappointment. "Fine," Marcus said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "But this isn't over." He turned and walked toward the house. Not by a long shot. We all returned inside as the sun began to set. The Book of Truth, as I'd started thinking of it, sat on the dining room table where everyone could see it. Uncle Raymond suggested we take a break for dinner and reconvene afterward to formally discuss next steps. I agreed, though my mind was spinning with everything that had happened. As we ate, Marcus was notably absent. I assumed he'd left the estate entirely, gone home to sulk, but I should have known better. Halfway through the meal, the lights went out. Complete darkness swallowed the room. Someone screamed. I heard chairs scraping, people calling out in confusion. Then I smelled it, smoke. I jumped up, knocking my chair over, and ran toward where I remembered the book being. In the faint moonlight coming through the windows, I could just make out a figure hunched over the table. Marcus. He had a lighter and he was holding pages from the book over the flame. "No!" I slammed into him, and we both crashed to the floor. The lighter flew from his hand, landing on the carpet where a page had already fallen. Fire licked at the edges of the paper. Someone found a flashlight. In its beam, I could see Marcus scrambling away from me toward the door. I let him go and focused on the fire instead. I grabbed a water glass from the table and dumped it on the burning page. The flames sputtered and died, but the damage was done. The page was half burned, its edges black and crumbling. I picked it up carefully. It was from the section about the mediator's financial responsibilities. Most of the text was gone, but I could make out fragments: trust fund totaling, and annual distribution of. Overseas management of multi-million. My heart sank. This must have been the page explaining exactly what the mediator position controlled. Marcus had tried to destroy the evidence of what he'd really been after all along. Uncle Raymond took the burned page from me and studied it in the flashlight beam. "We can probably reconstruct this. I remember your grandfather talking about the family trust. It's substantial." Aunt Lydia had her phone out, using its flashlight to examine the book for more damage. "Marcus only got this one page before Henry stopped him. The rest is intact." The lights came back on as someone found the breaker box Marcus had sabotaged. The family gathered again, this time with an edge of anger that hadn't been there before. Uncle Raymond called for an emergency assembly at dawn to formally address Marcus's actions and finalize the mediator decision. We spent the rest of the night taking turns guarding the book. I volunteered for the first watch, sitting in the library with the leather-bound volume on my lap. Sleep was impossible anyway. My mind kept replaying everything: the chair being pulled away, the torn letter, finding the key, the hidden passage, the map, Marcus's desperation. All of it had led to this moment. As the sun rose, casting orange light through the library windows, I heard the family stirring. People moved through the house, preparing for the assembly. By 6 o'clock, everyone was gathered in the main hall. Everyone except Marcus. Then the front door opened. Marcus walked in, flanked by his mother and his younger sister. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept at all. In his hands was a folder stuffed with papers. He walked to the center of the room and held the folder up. "I have evidence that Henry forged that legal document." The room erupted. People shouted questions and accusations. Grandma Miriam's cane struck the floor repeatedly until silence fell. "Show us this evidence," she commanded. Marcus pulled out papers from the folder. They were copies of documents comparing signature samples. "Look at the dates," Marcus said, his voice shaky but determined. David Peterson, the lawyer who supposedly witnessed that succession clause, was out of the country on the date the document was signed. He couldn't have been there. My stomach dropped, but before I could respond, Uncle Raymond stood up. "I'd like to see those travel records." Marcus handed them over. Uncle Raymond studied them for a long moment, then started to smile. "Marcus, you idiot, these records are for David Peterson, Jr. The lawyer who witnessed Robert's document was David Peterson, Sr., his father. They have offices in the same building." Marcus's face crumbled. I pulled out the burned page, now placed in a protective plastic sleeve. Aunt Lydia had been working on it overnight with a specialist who did document restoration. We were able to recover more text from this page using infrared imaging, I said. Would you like to hear what it says? I read from the restored document. The mediator position includes oversight of the family investment trust, currently valued at approximately $7 million. Annual distributions are made to family members based on need and merit, as determined by the mediator with council approval. The room went completely silent. $7 million. That's what Marcus had been so desperate to control. That's why he'd sabotaged me, why he'd tried to destroy evidence, why he'd been willing to cheat and lie. Uncle Raymond spoke quietly. Marcus, is that what this was about, the money? Marcus's shoulders slumped. His defiance finally broke. He sank into a chair and put his head in his hands. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I'm in debt, serious debt. Gambling. I owe people who don't forgive debts. I thought if I could become mediator, I could access the trust fund, pay them off. I thought. He trailed off. His sister put a hand on his shoulder, but her face showed disappointment more than sympathy. Grandma Miriam looked at Marcus with an expression I couldn't quite read, sadness mixed with something harder. Marcus, stand up. He stood slowly, not meeting her eyes. Do you understand what you've done? Marcus nodded mutely. Grandma Miriam's voice was steady but cold. You attempted to sabotage Henry's rightful claim through violence and deception. You tried to destroy family records. You brought shame to your father's memory and your own name. She paused, letting the words sink in. Therefore, I declare that you are stripped of voting rights in all family matters for 1 year. You are removed from any leadership positions within family businesses and organizations during that time. You will attend financial counseling and gambling addiction treatment at the family's expense, and you will publicly apologize to Henry. Marcus looked up then, his eyes red. I'm sorry, Henry. I'm so sorry. I was desperate and scared, and I let that turn me into someone I don't recognize. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was angry, wanted him to suffer more. But another part, the part that remembered growing up with Marcus, playing together as kids before things got complicated, felt only sadness. I accept your apology, I said quietly. Grandma Miriam turned to me. She gestured toward my father's chair, the one this had all started with. Henry, please sit down. I walked slowly to the chair. This time nobody stopped me. Nobody pulled it away. I sat down carefully, feeling the worn leather under my hands, breathing in that faint scent that reminded me of my father. The family watched in silence. Uncle Raymond approached, holding the Book of Truth. He opened it to a blank page near the end and handed me a pen. Write your name, Henry, accept the role. My hand hovered over the page. This was it. The moment I'd been working toward, the responsibility I'd inherited from my father. I started to write my name when the front door burst open. A messenger in a courier uniform stood there, breathing hard like he'd been running. I'm looking for Henry Thompson. I have an urgent delivery that requires signature. Everyone turned to stare at me. The messenger approached and held out a clipboard along with a large sealed envelope. The seal bore the insignia of a government office. I signed for it with shaking hands. The messenger left quickly, clearly uncomfortable with the tension in the room. I stared at the envelope. Open it, Grandma Miriam said gently. I broke the seal and pulled out a thick stack of papers. The cover letter made me gasp. The letter was from a trust management company. It confirmed that my father had established a separate trust fund in my name, one that would activate only upon 2 conditions. First, that I turned 25 years old, which I had 2 years ago, and second, that I was officially confirmed as family mediator. The trust had been growing for years, invested carefully. Its current value was over $2 million. The letter explained that my father had worked 3 jobs for 5 years to build the initial investment. He'd sacrificed his own comfort to ensure I'd have resources to lead the family fairly, without financial pressure or corruption. I could barely read through my tears. The family erupted in applause. Even Marcus managed a weak smile, though pain still showed on his face. I stood up, holding the letter. My father gave me everything I needed to be fair and just. He gave me truth, integrity, and the means to lead without desperation. I promised to honor that gift. I turned to Marcus. I'm going to make sure you get help with your debts. The trust your father controlled should have always been distributed fairly. That includes your family. Marcus's eyes widened. But after everything I did, I nodded. Because that's what a real mediator does. Not revenge, justice. I signed my name in the Book of Truth, officially accepting the role. The family applauded again. My father's chair no longer felt like a painful memory. It felt like home. I'd reclaimed his legacy, not through bitterness or anger, but through the values he'd spent his life teaching me. The meeting ended with plans for reforms, fair distribution of resources, and healing old wounds. As everyone dispersed, I sat alone in my father's chair for a moment. I could almost feel his presence, proud and peaceful. I'd finally stood up. And in standing, I'd found my true place in the family.